the research shows that the more yeses you have, the higher these incidents. And it changes a few things. It changes your stress response, which stress is one of the biggest drivers of inflammation. So there's that. And when we are under high stress, we also, when we drive inflammation, we kick up IL-6, interleukin 6. We also kick up the mother of inflammation, which is NF-kappa beta. And NF-kappa beta is basically sits on your immune system, and it just keeps cultivating more and more stress. It likes to bring a lot of friends to the party. So it just keeps that going. And that higher ACE score really kicks up both IL-6 and NF-kappa beta. It kicks up problems with stress response. So it's damaging, doing stuff with the amygdala, some of our primal responses to the fight or flight issues. It causes problems with our vagal nerve response. So we often have times with how we digest and rest and connect and breathe, all based on that nerve innervation. But what we've also seen, interesting enough, in postmortem, in brain scans of people still living and postmortem brain autopsies, are actual functional structural changes in the brain. And so it's almost like these poor kids, and I say this because I'm a 10 out of 10 on my ACE score, the neural pathways to rewire them. First, you have to even be aware that you have them. And I will speak from clear experience that people will never have that opportunity to even understand that they have an ACE score.
Right.
And that's really sad to me. I'd like to see that change, and I've got big plans for that in the future. But when you do start to realize, and I actually have every patient I ever work with or teach the doctors I work with to screen every patient for this. And I say, basically, if they have more than 3 ACE scores, you need to be on hypervigilance with these patients. They're going to have a harder time to get into remission, maintain remission, specific to the cancer world, or deal with what other chronic illnesses, until they start to rewire this puppy up here. And so it's this brain-derived neurofactor. You probably have people talking about that. Yeah. That's a player in this. There's so many ways to activate that. What I think, again, is so fascinating, fasting.
Yeah.
One of the most profound ways. Again, it makes me emotional to think about that accidental find of mine all those years ago. I think I started to rewire my entire system because of that.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. 100%. Prayer.
Right.
Meditation. Psychotropics. Okay. Yep. Psychotropics, pharmaceutical, but definitely. And, one thing I don't often share this in many places, but I was offered and took advantage of a very high dose of psilocybin shortly after my diagnosis. And I think that was integral in making some changes stick.
Right.
It's like I started the process, helped me see, because I was still so in the victim role. And so in that place, it helped me see some things very differently in the world around me. Travel, taking into language, anything that changes your experience will change that way. And I started doing that. I mean, I thought I was going to die. So I sold everything I owned and went on a backpacking trip through Europe, and then ran out of money and ended up in the Middle East. And then, like the crazy things here that happened, like that was also a key to my survival. Some people say, well, what is the one thing? I'm like, there isn't a one thing. Yeah. I just got lucky. Now I can look at the research now that's coming out that was never available or talked about then and go, well, that probably made a difference. Well, that probably made a difference. Well, that probably made a difference. And then I'm reading all the cool studies that say, yeah, that definitely made a difference along that. But the ACE score definitely makes it more challenging to prevent, overcome, and maintain. Plain and simple for chronic illness. So we need to be screening all of our patients for this.
Yeah, it's so important. And I know we have these cell guardians, right? Like the P53 gene, we have the BRCA gene, different things like that are often looked at. Now, these genes, obviously, we can have abnormalities in these genes, but also we turn on poor expression of them through stress and inflammation. How does that work? How do we turn those on?
Oh, okay. Do you want me to give you more of the layperson?
Yeah, let's start with what they are, because people have heard of like the BRCA gene and the P53 gene. So what is that? I mean, I mentioned it was a cell guardian. What is its role? And then how does kind of being in this state of chronic inflammation
perfect
turn on a poor expression of those genes?
That's perfect. So the beauty is, a lot of people, when we think genes like BRCA or P53, we think it's somehow like in cement, non-changeable, and we're just sort of a sitting duck, nothing we can do about it. But the cool thing about the vast majority of our genome is that we do have influences, and that we can change expression, turning things on and off at will or even accidentally or unbeknownst to us. Ultimately, things like the P53 is a tissue repair, gene repair system. Okay. P53, about 50% of the population have a wounded P53 on the planet right now. So it's like a flip of a coin. Some of us have one that works, some of us have one that don't. So for those that have one that don't, and it's hard, like you can test for this, but they're extremely expensive and most of them are in research environments. But it's best to assume that it's damaged. So you want to take care of it. You want to take care of that. And that is exactly by tending to those drops in the bucket we've talked about. But some of the most profound ways to make your P53 behave the way it was designed to behave are things like sulforaphane, cruciferous vegetables. For whenever you wanted to throw your broccoli at your parents when they told you to eat it as a kid, now you want to give them gratitude. There's really good data on this. Curcumin, very, very powerful. IV vitamin C, fasting yet again, ketogenic diet impact on this. When people think about the BRCA gene, today in our modern times, it just conjures up Angelina Jolie. And I don't mean to throw her under the bus, and that's what I'm doing, but it's a perfect point that she had a family line of this genetic mutation. And in her own early diagnosis, she opted to have her breasts removed. And because of her gene, she also opted to have her ovaries removed. That in her world and how our medical system teaches, that's considered prevention. And yet I can tell you now, I've had nearly a dozen patients who had done all the prophylactic surgeries because of a strong family genetic, ATM, Lynch, or BRCA mutation, which are all DNA repair mutations and methylation problem mutations. Right. They all opted to just cut parts off. And what that did for them is it gave them a false sense of security. It did not encourage them to get curious and dig deeper and change their environment. And so out of this group that did this, that came to me later with cancer, stage 4, 7 of those have passed on. And they were so angry. They were so angry they did everything right.
Right.
That's just unfortunately misinformation. I had the BRCA gene. I was diagnosed young. Just this morning, I was looking on it's like I just lost another cousin to another, it's everywhere in my family. And my family has a tendency to just want to cut things out and move on.
Yeah.
I still have all my parts. Okay. I'm the only person in my family still has a thyroid or breasts or ovaries. I will be the only person in my family to probably go through a natural menopause. Never happens. The weird thing here, it's like, I've not even had an opportunity to see what it's really supposed to be like in my family of origin, because we are so quick to medicate or eradicate or remove. Right. But what happens is when you take something out in a system that has that vulnerability, you actually wake up a lot of sleeping tigers. Those are called mother stem cells. All right. And if you have a terrain that is vulnerable, that is being a lot of drops in the bucket added to it, you can end up with stage 4 breast cancer in your big toe, for crying out loud, even if you don't have breasts any longer. You can end up with stage 4 ovarian cancer in your brain if you no longer have ovaries. This is what we are seeing. We need to teach our patients, frankly, our doctors, a different understanding of what this really means. So if I see a BRCA mutation, I just go, yeah, I just have some methylation issues. Great, we've got tools in this. Interestingly enough, a BRCA mutation does not have a difference in survival rate than anybody else with breast cancer. So we make a big ado about a gene that we give all the power to, that by the end of the day, it does not make any difference if you have BRCA or no BRCA with breast cancer.
Because there are a number of other tumor suppressing genes as well. So we're focusing on one, we're highlighting one, but there's a whole bunch. It's kind of like taking BPA out of plastic. There's still a whole bunch of other chemicals, even though that's been the most well-researched. Yes. The plastic still has a whole bunch of phthalates and things that are going to cause problems. It's kind of the same idea.
The perfect idea. That's a great analogy for that, because we have these other mutations, but again, we keep focusing on the tumor, the target or the mutation, and then we keep going at it in a single agent, addressing it with a single agent.
Yeah.
This model has been failing us for a good 75 years or more. And yet we keep funneling massive amounts of money into it. And now all the rage is off-label drugs. Guess what? They're great. It's so good that there's something different than chemo, but it isn't. It's targeted the tumor and the same target on the cell. It's not changing the terrain. In fact, it is still making the terrain sick.